Welcome. If you are someone who sets ambitious goals but then finds yourself losing momentum after just a few weeks, this analysis is for you. We're going to be examining Daniel Walter's manual, The Power of Discipline. And the core idea here is, well, it's quite direct. Talent and intelligence are almost useless if you lack the self-control to apply them consistently. Before we begin, please note that this review and its structure have been professionally generated using advanced artificial intelligence tools to ensure a thorough and technical analysis.
That is the central thesis, and it's supported by some pretty stark data. We know that less than 10% of common resolutions are ever actually achieved. Walter argues that this isn't because of a lack of desire, it's because of a lack of systematic discipline. So today, we'll look at this through three specific lenses. First, the biology of discipline, then the psychological traps that hold us back, and finally, the practical systems you can implement.
Let's begin with that first point, the biology of willpower. This really shifts our understanding of discipline from some vague personality trait to a skill you can actually train. Neurobiology, and specifically studies that use fMRIs, they show us something fascinating. When you choose a long-term benefit over an immediate reward, say, choosing to work out instead of hitting the snooze button, you can see high levels of activity in the decision-making centers of your brain.
Exactly. We're talking about the prefrontal cortices, specifically the ventral medial and the dorsolateral areas. This region is essentially the CEO of your brain. It manages what we call executive functions, which includes impulse control. And the act of making these healthy choices over and over again, it physically strengthens those neural connections.
Yeah.
It's a skill you build with repetition.
And the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment, or at least the reevaluation of it, really drove this point home. The children who could delay gratification, they showed more activity in those same prefrontal cortices. But also differences in the ventral striatum, which is the part of the brain linked to pleasure and, well, to addiction.
Which tells you that discipline is really the mechanism that overrides our very powerful, very natural urge for a quick dopamine hit. But this brings us to a major operational problem: willpower fatigue. Discipline is a finite resource. Walter describes a well-known 1996 study by Baumeister. One group had to use immense willpower to resist eating fresh-baked cookies. When both groups were later asked to solve a difficult puzzle, the group that resisted the cookies gave up much, much faster. They had used up their willpower.
So what's the practical takeaway from that? If our willpower is like a fuel tank, we have to protect it. The author suggests two key strategies. First, mitigate your stress. High cortisol levels cause the prefrontal cortex to malfunction, which leads to impulsive short-term thinking. And second, you need to engineer your environment to remove temptations altogether. Protect that limited resource from being constantly drained.
And when you do protect it, the benefits are enormous. Beyond just an increase in self-confidence, the systemic benefits are highly protective. Discipline acts as a very strong defense against self-destructive behaviors.
Absolutely. There's a whole field in behavioral science, self-control theory, that directly links criminal acts to an inability to control one's desires. But even in less extreme cases, research on college students shows a very clear correlation. High self-control is linked to less binge drinking, less abuse of prescription drugs, and fewer impulsive, risky behaviors.
So moving from the biology to the psychological hurdles, we have to ask why change is so incredible. And there are other factors that make it worse, like the mere exposure effect. The longer you're in a situation, even a negative one, the more your subconscious starts to associate it with normalcy, making it harder to leave. To counteract this, Walter recommends a very structured exercise. It's called the thought evaluation exercise. It's a four-part analysis where you rationally list the pros and cons of staying the same versus making the change. It forces you to be objective.
The next psychological trap to be aware of is the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you've ever thought to yourself, oh, I'm pretty disciplined, you might want to pay close attention here. This effect describes people who are, frankly, incompetent in a certain area, but they lack the self-awareness or the metacognition to see it.
It's what's called the double burden. They consistently make mistakes, but they're also completely ignorant of the fact that they're making them. And since discipline is a learned skill, it is very possible to overestimate your own mastery of it.
So what's the solution?
It's about balancing self-assurance with a genuine willingness to seek out objective and sometimes uncomfortable feedback. The deeper you study any skill, including self-discipline, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. And that realization is the best defense against complacency.
Okay, let's move from the theory to the practical systems, starting with daily habits. Habits are the behaviors you perform on autopilot. And over time, they really do reflect your character. The author focuses a lot on the two ends of the day.
Yes, the morning routine is absolutely critical for setting the tone. We see examples like Barack Obama's 45 minutes of exercise or Bill Gates starting at 4 a.m. with educational material. It is about winning those first few hours. And the final hour before sleep is just as important, disconnecting from screens and ensuring you get at least 7 hours of quality rest to refill that willpower tank.
And what about other specific habits that build this kind of mental toughness?
Practicing gratitude is a big one. Research shows a strong link between gratitude and self-control. This involves writing down about 5 specific things you're thankful for each day. Then there's setting daily goals. This breaks down a huge, intimidating long-term goal into small, manageable daily actions. And finally, many successful people incorporate reading and some form of meditation or mindfulness before 8 a.m. Constant learning and presence are non-negotiable.
Now, in Chapter 6, we get some techniques from elite groups like the Navy SEALs. The 40% rule is a really powerful one. It states that when your mind tells you that you're exhausted, you've actually only used about 40% of your true capacity. Just believing you have more in the tank allows you to push past that pain point, which builds resilience.
This really taps into the power of the mind, which we also see with the placebo effect. If you believe something will improve your performance, it often does. For managing stress, arousal control is essential. Simple methods like box breathing can slow your heart rate and counteract that primal fight-or-flight response. It keeps your rational brain in charge.
And there are 2 other rules here that are critical. The first is the 10x rule. This means setting goals that are 10 times higher than what you actually want to achieve. It forces you to take 10 times the action, which commits you to a permanent lifestyle change instead of just a temporary effort.
And for managing those in-the-moment temptations, there's the 10-minute rule. It's a strategic pause. Before you indulge in impulse, just wait for 10 minutes. By removing the immediate part of immediate gratification, you give your prefrontal cortex time to catch up and make a better decision.
Let's turn to the obstacles we put in our own way, especially procrastination, which is covered in Chapter 7. Procrastination often disguises itself as waiting for the perfect circumstances, which, as the text makes very clear, will never arrive.
The strategy to counter this is the 70% rule. You should begin a task or project when you are 70% certain of success. If you wait for 100% certainty, you will never start. It's an impossible standard. We also have to be aware of what's called the false hope syndrome. This is the mistaken belief that breaking a bad habit will be easy and fast. This leads to sky-high expectations, which are followed by failure, and then that failure just reinforces the negative behavior. Discipline requires accepting that it is a long and difficult process.
And a key part of mastering that process is laid out in Chapter 8. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Willpower is like a muscle. It only gets stronger when you consciously push it outside of its comfort zone. This is how you learn that most of our fears are just false evidence appearing real.
And for managing very specific urges, like a craving, the book details a method called urge surfing. It was developed by an addiction psychologist named Alan Marlett. It compares an urge to an ocean waves. It builds in intensity, it crests, and then it naturally crashes and fades away. The key is to observe it without identifying with it. Instead of saying, I need a piece of cake, you say, I am experiencing an urge to eat cake. That separation is crucial.
And this all leads to probably the most powerful strategic shift in the entire book, which is in Chapter 9. Focus on the system, not the goal. A goal gives you a direction, of course, but it's your system, your daily process, that actually gets you the results. Simply tidying a messy room is a temporary fix. Without changing the system of untidiness, you get the yo-yo effect. You just end up back where you started.
Precisely. The system is what separates those who achieve lasting change from those who don't. But you have to go one layer deeper. The most lasting change is rooted in your identity. Your behavior is a reflection of who you believe you are. For example, saying, I don't smoke is a statement of identity. Saying, I'm trying to quit means you still see yourself as a smoker. When a good habit becomes part of your self-image, when you see yourself as a runner or a writer, the effort needed to do the behavior drops significantly. It aligns with who you are.
That difference between trying and doing is a really critical point. Chapter 12 says you should just eliminate the word try from your vocabulary. Trying allows for excuses. When you do, the results are clear and measurable. It forces maximum effort.
Now let's look at some of the advanced principles, starting with Zen philosophy in Chapter 10. Zen provides a powerful framework for discipline by emphasizing living in the present and accepting that suffering is a natural part of life. This mindset reduces the huge amount of energy we waste worrying about the future or ruminating on the past.
The example given is of the Shaolin monks. Their intense daily routine from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. is focused on study, martial arts, and their duties. Their incredible discipline comes from a deep sense of purpose, gratitude, and the mastery of their essential life force, or qi, which they cultivate through meditation.
And that brings us to the scientifically documented benefits of meditation itself. Even just 7 days of consistent practice can improve focus, rational thinking, and the ability to delay gratification. The text outlines techniques like zazen, which is just sitting and focusing on deep breathing, and shikantaza, which involves passively observing your thoughts without any judgment.
For listeners focused on achievement, Chapter 13 outlines 5 basic rules that successful people follow. First, know what you want. Set specific goals that align with your values. Second, do not cut corners. True pride comes from genuine effort. Third, do not make a big leap. Success comes from small, consistent, measured steps.
The last 2 rules are about maintenance. Fourth, repetition is the key to success. You have to commit to the daily, sometimes boring practice. And fifth, celebrate your wins. Acknowledging small milestones along the way reinforces that positive winner's identity.
But how do you keep going when motivation fades? Chapter 14 says you have to fall in love with the process. Motivation will always come and go, so you have to condition your brain to enjoy the work itself. This is done through the power of association.
It's essentially applying Pavlovian conditioning to your work. You consistently pair a difficult task, like writing a business plan, with an immediate positive stimulus. Maybe it's your favorite music or a small reward afterward. Over time, your brain begins to associate the hard work itself with pleasure. The process becomes its own reward, which makes the habit much easier to maintain.
Interestingly, the author also suggests we can use our negative emotions to our advantage. That's in Chapter 15. Things like anger and rage can provide the physical energy needed for a tough workout or the motivation to prove your doubters wrong. Envy and jealousy can act as signposts. They show you what you desire, which can then push you to create a real plan to achieve it.
Even fear and anxiety can be channeled constructively. Instead of letting fear paralyze you, you can use it to trigger problem solving. And for more difficult emotions like shame, the book, referencing researchers like Brené Brown, suggests that sharing those feelings with someone you trust is the key to moving forward.
To avoid getting discouraged, Chapter 16 introduces 2 principles to help manage your expectations. The first is Sturgeon's law, which says that 90% of everything is substandard, and the second is the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. Understanding these laws helps you accept that most of your efforts won't lead to major breakthroughs. It protects you from discouragement when things don't work out.
And this directly informs how to handle failure. A loss must be seen as an opportunity for objective learning, not as an emotional crisis. Real wisdom is knowing when a strategy has failed, giving up on it gracefully, and then redirecting your energy to the 20% of efforts that are actually working.
And finally, a crucial topic for high achievers. Chapter 17 deals with how to avoid burnout. Burnout isn't just stress, it's a state of deep physical and mental exhaustion that requires significant recovery time. To prevent it, you have to set limits. You have to learn to say no to things that drain you, and you must be rigid about your health routines, sleep, nutrition, and hydration.
And a key proactive strategy is meticulous scheduling. When you start a big project, be realistic. Assume it will take about 1.5 times longer than you initially think. If burnout does happen, recovery requires real time off and a deep reflection on what coping mechanisms failed you, so you can prevent it from happening again.
This analysis has given us a very detailed look into what it takes to master self-discipline. We've gone from the neurobiology of willpower to the strategic use of our own psychology and emotions. The message of the text is unmistakable. Self-discipline isn't just a tool you use sometimes. It has to be a comprehensive lifestyle choice. It is the daily commitment to your systems that will unlock your potential.
We strongly recommend you pursue the original material, The Power of Discipline by Daniel Walter, to fully integrate these principles into your life. The ultimate message is that to achieve your purpose, you must first learn to lead yourself through consistent, conscious action. We encourage you, our dedicated listeners, to subscribe to this feed for more insightful analysis. We wish you a great day.